According to the WWF, the pace at which the Arctic sea ice is melting has severely accelerated and could bring about rapid and unstoppable climate change in natural systems across the world. Scientific studies show the continuing loss of older, thicker ice means that the Arctic ice cover has become dramatically younger and thinner this year.
We've been measuring the extent of the Arctic sea ice since 1979, and we've been seeing a steady decrease in the amount of ice cover in the Arctic. But what we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years in particular is that dramatically tailing off. And what that really shows is that climate change is happening far faster than I think even we would have predicted 10 years ago. And this has dramatic consequences both on the ground for the wildlife in the Arctic, but also globally. It shows just how fast climate change is impacting the global environment and the global climate, and that has repercussions everywhere in the world.
Change is occurring in all the Arctic systems, affecting the atmosphere and oceans, sea ice, the ice sheets, snow and permafrost, as well as species and populations.
The Arctic has been described as the canary in the coal mine for climate change. That is where you'll see the impacts first. And everything we see in the Arctic is likely to have both repercussions around the world, but also to start to then see those impacts across the world. So the fact that the Arctic is warming so quickly, the fact that the sea ice is melting so fast, that has direct impacts on the whole global climate because the Arctic acts as a cooling mechanism on the whole global climate, but it also risks releasing methane and carbon that's stored within the Arctic permafrost, thus even more accelerating global climate change. So you have two impacts there really. You're seeing the impacts of man-made climate change very fast, but you're also risking unleashing further amplification of that climate change, which will make it all happen far faster and far more serious.
There are signs that species such as polar bears are suffering as climate change erodes the ice platform on which they rely. There are also changes affecting the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, whose traditional livelihoods depend on healthy ecosystems.
The impacts on species like the polar bears, like the whales that rely on the Arctic Sea, is dramatic. We're seeing huge changes in that ecosystem, far more than any other in the world, and it's directly affecting all of the wildlife on the ground there. But also it means that because of the knock-on effects on the rest of the global climate, we're seeing the whole global climate warm and change, and that's starting to affect species all over the planet.
The WWF is now urging the UK government and other world leaders to heed the global implications of this loss of Arctic ice cover and take immediate action to reduce emissions.
2009 really, or from now to the end of 2009, really is the year of climate change. We're having a big negotiation across the whole world to try and come up with a post-Kyoto framework. So the extent to which countries all over the world will cut their carbon emissions. Now we've got really one last chance to get this right. If we make those cuts strong enough and fast enough, and if they apply all over the world, we can still halt climate change fast enough. But what this has shown, what these recent studies in the Arctic have shown, is we really have no more time left.
The conservation group says by adopting a strong climate change bill and championing a stronger EU climate and energy package, the UK can pave the way for a more ambitious UN climate agreement to come into force.